Hello everyone, I Shivam Agarwal, Assistant Professor of BCom Department. I welcome you all in the lecture series of Information System Management. Now we are on the fourth unit of our syllabus, that is of uh, systems and information systems. And in this unit we have to done about what is the transaction processing system. So first of all, we have to know the transaction processing system is a system which helps us out to do the transactions, whatever transaction which are doing in an organization. All the credit and debits are recorded, and they are managed by this system that is known as the transaction processing system. So let's start a transaction processing system. So a transaction processing system, we can say it is a TPS, is a type of information system that collects, store, modifies and retrieves the data transaction of an enterprises. So basically it collects, modifies, retrieves and all the data transactions, all the information transaction which can be done in an organization. So transaction processing system also attempt to provide a predictable response times to request, although this is not as critical as far as real-time systems, rather than allowing the user to run arbitrary programs as time sharing. Transaction processing allows only predefined structured transactions. Each transaction is usually short duration, and the processing activity for each transaction is programmed in advance. So basically, in this we can allow short duration transaction systems, and each transaction the process activity of each transaction is programmed in advance. Means we have to program every transaction in advance so that it can be done in a one in a short period of time, and there will be no waiting and response time for that. So the transaction processing system features are performance, fast performance because the short duration time, and it all the programs are previously defined and the programmed are previously done. So that's why it is the performance of this transaction is high. So the fast performance with the rapid response time is critical. Transaction processing system are usually measured by the number of transactions they can process in a given period of time. Means if I have to find out the performance of a transaction processing system, so what is the procedure? The procedure of finding that performance is that we have to calculate in in limited period of time how many transactions are done. So according to that we can identify the performance of the transaction processing system. Next one is the continuous availability. It will be available all the time. So the system must be available during the time period when the users are entering transactions. Many organizations rely heavily on their TPS. A breakdown will disrupt operations or even stop the business, because if the transactions are if the TPS system is breakdown, then the information will be there will be no sharing of information, and there should be a breakdown of the organization, or I can say there will be a stop of the business. So that's why it is continuously available for the organization. There will be no shutdown of the system must be, if there is a shutdown, that should be maintained properly within a very less amount of time. So that's continuous availability. Next one is the data integrity. So as we all know that the integrity means there will be no change in the data. If there is a change in the data, that means the integrity will be lost. The system must be able to handle hardware or software problems without corrupting data. Means there will be no corruption in data, there will be no changes of data with an unauthorized user. Multiple user must be protected from attempting to change the same piece of data at the same time. For example, two operations cannot sell the same seat on an airplane. So that's integrity means, if suppose that if I have opted a seat 1 for reservation in a plane ticket, so the another person cannot opted that seat 1 for their reservation. So that is the data integrity. Next one is the ease of use. That is the ease of use. Often user of transaction processing system are casual users. The system should be simple for them to understand, protect them from data entry errors as much as possible, and allow them to easily correct their errors. So basically, it is very ease of use is in the data processing system, because uh, the system should be simple for them to understand. There will be no critical system, protected from data entry errors. All the things are protected, and as much as possible, and allow them to easily correct their errors, and it will allow the users to easily correct their errors. So that's why it is the ease of use is the features of a transaction processing system. Next one is the modular growth. So the systems should be capable of growth at incremental cost rather than requiring a complete replacement. Means it should be growing in an incremental cost, not that I have to complete replacement all the system. It should be possible to add, replace or update hardware and software component without shutting down the system. If suppose that is there any technology enhancement I want to need in the transaction processing system, so there is no need that I have to completely restore that system, and for that it will take so much time, and that's a loss for the organization. So for that we have there will be components which we can changes. So if there is any component, if I want to change them, so I can easily change them without any error. So that's a part of modular growth. So it can be not a complete replacement, but it can be done with some parts, components of the system with growth. Now coming to the types of transaction processing system. So it will process in a batch. There are two types of processing system. One is batch transaction processing system, and another one is real time processing system. So transaction may be collected and processed as in the batch processing. Batch means that some same type of transaction are made up of one batch, and that batch should be processed in a single unit of time. That should be a batch. So the transaction will be collected and later updated as a batch when it is convenient or economical to process them. Means we have collected the transaction into a batch, and we will process them when there will be convenient for the transaction processing system, and economical means there will be efficient time for transaction them. Historically, this was the most common method, as the information technology did not exist to allow real-time processing. So that's why it is a basically most common method which we are using for transaction processing system, that is in the batch processing system. Another one is the real time. The processing in real time, it means that this is the immediate processing of data. Real time means whatever you transaction you have done in that time, it should be done in that proper time. So that should be means real time. Actual time processing is there. It provides instant confirmation of a transaction. It may involve a large number of users who are simultaneously performing transaction with the changed data. Because of advance in technology such as increase in the speed of data transmission and larger bandwidth, real time bandwidth is possible. So it may involve a large number of users who are simultaneously performing transaction. Means the transaction are performing simultaneously with change data. Because if there is any advance in now, and there are so many advanced technologies, so there is a speed of transaction is very high, and larger bandwidth data cables are available. So we can done the real time processing system in the transaction processing system. The example of real time transaction processing system is that the bank management system, banking system. Whatever we have done transaction in that time, that should be reflected in all the database in that real time. So that's a real time processing system. Now the features of transaction processing systems are: the following features are desirable in a database system that use a transaction processing system. One is good data placement. The database should be designed to access pattern of data from many simultaneously user. Next one is the short transaction. Short transaction enable quick processing. This avoid concurrency and paces the system. So that's why the short transaction should be done in the transaction processing system. Real-time backup should be scheduled between low times of activity to prevent lag of server. So basically, if there is a no real-time backup, that should it may be done that if the database will be crashed, then we can lost the some very useful information, because transactions is a very useful information and we cannot level lost them. So that's why we have to need backup them simultaneously in a very short period of time. So that's a features of a transaction processing system, real-time backup. High normalization, this lowers redundant information to increase the speed and improve concurrency. This also improves backup. Normalizations means we have to reduce the redundant data. So high normalization means when there is no redundant data, means we have to try to make sure that there will be no redundant data, and with the help of them we can increase the speed and improve the concurrency of the transactions. This will improve backups also. Archiving of historical data. Commonly used data are moved into other database or backed up tables. This keeps tables small and also improve backup times. So basically, the data which is not used from a very long period of time, that should be transferred into a secondary data, and that helps the server to manage the load, because the data which is not usable for from a very long period time, that should be transferred into other databases, so that there will be no need to update the data all the time. So that's why archiving of historical data is done here. Next one is the good hardware configuration. Hardware must be able to handle many users and provide quick response time. So it has a good hardware configuration. So that's why it will allow users to many users and simultaneously to use that hardware, and it is a very quick response time for that hardware. Rapid response. The response time of a transaction processing system is very important, because a business cannot afford to have their customer waiting for a long period of time before making a transaction. So that's why there will be rapid transaction. Rapid means instant transaction should be done in the transaction processing system. Reliability. A good transaction processing system must be very reliable, because if it is were to break down, business could lose a huge portion of revenue, because customer would not be able to purchase their products. So there should be a reliable. Next one is the inflexibility. The TPS must work on the same way for every transaction as long as the TPS is being used. The formality and structure should never change. Means if there is any transaction is done in a very fast manner, and another transaction is done, so it should be done in the same proper manner. There should be no change for any transaction. Means if there is a short transaction, we have to apply this technique. If there is a large transaction, we have to apply this technique. For all the transaction, there should be a proper structure and formality should be followed by TPS. Controlled processing. The TPS must be able to allow authorized employees to be able to access it any time. So controlled processing means it should be a property of authorization and authentication. So if there is an authenticate user, so it can access that TPS as many times as he or she wants. Storing and retrieving data from TPS. So a TPS must be able to easily be accessed by authorized employees, so that the information the TPS can be retrieved. As we know that TPS allow only the authorized user to access them, so that's why it is saying that the information that grows through a TPS must never be deleted, so that there will not be any confusion of what orders have gone through it. It is a good idea to have a backup hard drive, so that the older information can still be stored but will not slow down the server which house the TPS. So it always be good idea to backup the data into a hard drive, so that the older information can still be stored in the that should be not used in a proper time, but will not have slow down the server which house the TPS. But it never be done that we are storing that data into a server data, so that the older data, so that the server will slow down. So that's storing and retrieving of data. So that is all about TPS. So So basically TPS is a processing system which enables the users to do transaction in a real time situation and in a batch processing time, and these are there are so many features of TPS to providing uh, to the enterprises so that the user can transmit their can do their transaction in a real time period. So that's the capabilities of TPS. So that's all about today's lecture. Thank you.